It happened in the blink of an eye. 1 second, I was holding Ben's hand, watching him skip along the road with a smile that still managed to pierce through the fog of my exhaustion. The next, everything went silent, save for the deafening screech of tires. My heart skipped a beat. The car was coming at us, its front end swerving, the driver's desperate attempt to regain control failing miserably. I saw it, saw the metallic gleam of the vehicle, and realized with sickening clarity that it was heading straight for us. Ben's small, trusting face turned toward me, the smile quickly fading into confusion, followed by sheer terror. I didn't think. There was no time to think. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I shoved him hard, pushed him away behind me, and felt the sharp, sickening thud as the car slammed into me. The world went dark, pain, unbearable, blinding pain, pulling me back to the surface. I could feel my body broken, bruised, crumpled. There was no air in my lungs, no way to take a deep breath without a sharp, jagged gasp. The ground felt too hard, too cold against my skin. I couldn't move. But my thoughts, they raced. Ben. I needed to make sure he was okay. I tried to speak, but couldn't. My tongue felt like it was made of lead. I could hear him calling my name, could hear the panic in his voice, but my own voice, where was it? I wanted to call back to him, to tell him everything would be okay. I wanted him to know that it was worth it. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. But instead, all I could do was lie there, helpless. The shock, the rush of adrenaline made everything feel surreal, like a dream or a nightmare. The weight of it all threatened to crush me. As my body felt heavier, my mind drifted. Years. I thought about the years I had spent, years of being there for everyone else. I thought about Rachel, my daughter, how I had raised her, how I had sacrificed my life for hers. And then, of course, Ben, her son. Eh. I took care of him, loved him as if he were my own. But where was the love in return? Where was the gratitude? Was it worth it? The dizziness swirled inside my head, and I lost consciousness, but not before I heard Ben's desperate voice. I woke in a hospital room. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me like a slap, making the sharp pain in my side feel all the more real. The beeping of machines around me was steady, almost soothing, but in the pit of my stomach, something twisted. The rhythmic beep didn't match the storm raging inside me. The shock of the accident had faded, leaving a gaping void, one I couldn't fill with any amount of sleep or painkillers. I blinked, trying to focus. The first thing I saw was Rachel, standing at the foot of my bed, her arms folded. She looked tired, but it wasn't from worry. No, it was the kind of tired that came from frustration, from inconvenience. I could tell she didn't want to be here, didn't want to be dealing with this. Mom, the doctor says you'll be okay, she said, her voice flat, the words falling from her lips without much feeling. We'll just have to adjust, figure out what to do. Rachel. My voice was a rasp, barely a whisper, but I had to say something. Ben, is he all right? Rachel hesitated. She glanced toward the door where Nancy, my mother-in-law, standing stiffly, arms crossed, was watching us like she was waiting for something. It wasn't concern in her eyes, but annoyance. Annoyance that I had put them in this position. Annoyance that I was lying in a hospital bed instead of being functional, of being able to help with whatever they had planned. She was always like that, always weighing the inconvenience of my existence. Ben's fine. He's in the waiting room. He's more upset about you being hurt than anything, Rachel said, her tone sharp, like it was a problem to be solved. But we've got to figure out how to handle all this, the bills, the arrangements. You'll need to stay with us for a while. We can manage, don't worry. A jolt of frustration shot through me, a wave of heat. Not for the first time, I wondered if Rachel even knew how to worry, if she understood what it meant to be there for someone, truly be there. The question lingered in the air as my gaze shifted to Nancy. Her expression remained stoic, but I could almost hear her thoughts. Not again, not another problem to solve. I shifted uncomfortably in the bed, trying to focus on the pain that was still sharp in my side. But the emotional ache, the one that felt like it was pulling me apart from the inside out, was unbearable. I had never asked for much, never expected anything more than the bare minimum in return for all I'd given, all I'd sacrificed. But now, lying here in this sterile room, feeling so small, so invisible, I realized the truth. My entire life, I had lived for them. And for what? A second of concern? A fleeting moment of appreciation? Rachel and Nancy continued to discuss logistics, how to handle the insurance, how they would rearrange things at home without once asking how I was feeling. I felt the years of bitterness well up inside me like a rising tide, threatening to drown me. Was this all I was to them? A convenience, a tool, a machine that kept their lives running smoothly without ever needing to be appreciated, cared for, or loved. The realization was painful, sharper than the brokenness of my body. I lay there silently listening to the conversation between Rachel and Nancy, their voices droning on in the background like a dull buzz. They never once spoke to me like I mattered, never once looked at me as anything other than a means to an end, and as I stared out the window, a thought struck me like a cold wave. Something inside me has changed. I would never be the same again. The days after the accident bled into each other, one indistinguishable from the next. My body was healing slowly, the bruises fading like forgotten memories. But my spirit felt as though it was being hollowed out, 1 minute at a time. The hospital bed had been traded for the couch in Rachel's living room, but somehow the space around me felt just as cold. I wasn't healing here, not in any way that mattered. It's strange how pain works, isn't it? How the sharpest cuts don't always come from the body. No, the deepest wounds seem to come from places you didn't even know existed. I thought the hardest part of this ordeal would be the physical recovery, the cracked ribs and the bruises, the sleepless nights spent twisting uncomfortably in the silence of my own pain. But that was nothing compared to the emotional isolation I now felt, the sense that I was invisible, a mere ghost in my own life. Rachel, who was supposed to be my daughter, came and went like the wind, always in a rush, always with somewhere to be. When she was around, she barely spared me a glance. If I asked her for something, no matter how small, it was either forgotten or dismissed as unimportant. My pain was just another thing she had to manage, and managing it was simply another chore, one among many. There were times when I caught her, right in front of me, slipping into that familiar role of appeasing Nancy, my mother-in-law, my rock, as Rachel liked to call her, though it felt more like a weight, dragging me down with every passing day. I watched Rachel bend over backward to cater to Nanny's every need. She made sure her tea was just the right temperature, checked if she needed anything, rearranged the pillows on the couch, laughed at every small, insignificant comment Nancy made, even when the joke wasn't funny. And there I was, sitting in the corner, not even a second glance from her. My limbs ached from the awkward way I sat, half reclined in the chair. I could feel the weight of it, the weight of the years spent doing the same thing for her, making sure everything was in place, making sure her world didn't falter. And yet I was nothing more than a fixture in the house now. I wasn't important. I couldn't even remember the last time Rachel had looked at me the way she looked at Nancy, that loving gaze, the one that told me I was her world. What happened to that? The bitterness started to swell, filling the spaces inside of me that I had tried so desperately to fill with love. I had given her everything, everything I had. I worked myself to the bone, taking care of her, then Ben, and when I thought it would be a relief to see her grow up, to see her become independent, she turned her back on me. It wasn't just about the lack of appreciation, it was the coldness, the dismissiveness. The feeling that to her I wasn't a mother or a person anymore. I was just there. I looked down at my hands, the rough, weathered skin from years of working in the kitchen, cleaning the house, folding laundry, mending clothes, and taking care of Ben. I had never expected gratitude, but at some point, I had hoped for a simple acknowledgement. And I see you, Mom. But Rachel didn't see me, not anymore. The frustration bubbled up inside me like a boiling pot, threatening to spill over, and it finally did. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, making lunch as I always did, while Rachel and Nancy were perched on the couch. Their voices were light, full of casual conversation, and I couldn't help but notice how Rachel seemed to hang on Nancy's every word, how she laughed at things that didn't even deserve a smile. Meanwhile, I chopped vegetables in silence, the knife slicing through the produce with a sharp, rhythmic precision. Every movement felt mechanical. The smell of onions burned in my eyes, but it wasn't the onions that made them water. No, it was the hurt that welled up inside me. As I set the food on the table, Rachel barely looked up. Nancy's attention was on her phone, and I was invisible. I waited for a compliment, for a glance, for anything, but nothing came. It was as though the words I'd said to Rachel had set something free inside me, something I didn't even realize had been chained up for all these years. The desire to reclaim my own life, to stop living for everyone else, began to burn brightly in me. I'd spent so much of my life giving, sacrificing without a thought for myself. I had been Rachel's emotional crutch, her caretaker, her unpaid maid. I had let myself be invisible, expecting nothing in return. But now everything had changed. As I lay in bed that night, my body stiff from the accident, but my mind wide awake, I began to reflect on everything. How many years had I spent giving, never receiving? How many meals had I cooked for them? How many loads of laundry had I folded? How many hours had I spent caring for Ben while Rachel went about her life, never once looking back at me as though I mattered? I had given her everything, and she had taken it all, without so much as a thank you. And now, after everything, she thought she could just demand more from me? My pension, my only source of independence? Rachel thought she had a right to it too? The more I thought about it, the more disgusted I became. It was a slow burn of realization, but once it started, I couldn't stop it. Rachel's self centeredness, her utter disregard for me as a person, made me sick. I had allowed her to treat me like a tool for too long, and now I was the one who had to live with the consequences of that. The pain of betrayal was sharp, but it wasn't as sharp as the guilt that gnawed at me. How could I feel so much guilt for standing up for myself? Wasn't this what I had needed all along? I had spent my entire life putting everyone's needs above my own, and when I finally stood up for myself, it felt wrong. But that's how manipulation works, doesn't it? You make yourself believe you're the one at fault, that you owe something to those who have used you for their own benefit. Still, beneath the guilt, there was something else, something powerful, a feeling that for the first time in my life, I wasn't at the mercy of someone else's whims. The decision to speak out had given me a voice, and that voice wasn't going to be silenced again. I wasn't going to keep living like this, like a shadow, disappearing into the background of their lives. The tension in the house was thick. Rachel barely spoke to me in the days that followed, but I could feel her eyes on me, like a weight pressing down on me, waiting for me to cave, to go back to the way things were. I didn't. I couldn't. But Rachel, always the manipulator, didn't stop trying. One morning, she walked into my room holding a piece of paper in her hand. I could tell she had been planning this for a while. Her words were rehearsed, calm and cold. Mom, she began, her voice a mixture of faux concern and calculation. The hospital bills are starting to pile up. You know, with your recovery and all, it's going to be tough to manage. I think it would be a good idea if you helped out. You've got your pension, right? You could help cover some of the costs. It's the least you could do. My heart sank. The audacity, the sheer entitlement. I felt the blood rushing to my ears, my pulse hammering in my chest. Every word she said hit me like a slap, and yet there was no physical sting. No, the sting was inside, deep in my gut, in the pit of my stomach where I had buried all the years of resentment. No, Rachel, I said, my voice low but firm. My pension is mine. I earned it. I won't be used anymore. Her face twisted in confusion, as if she couldn't comprehend what I was saying. But Mom, it's only fair. You're part of this family. No, I cut her off, feeling the words surge out of me, empowered, like a dam breaking. I've given enough. You've taken enough from me. No more. I won't give any more of myself to you. I'm done. There was a moment of silence. Rachel looked at me, her eyes narrowing in disbelief, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. I was done being afraid of her. The weight of the decision settled in my chest like a stone, but I didn't flinch. I felt a strange calmness wash over me. I had taken control. The relief was immediate, but it was also mixed with a strange sadness. Sadness for what I had lost, for what I would never get back. But that sadness wasn't for Rachel. It was for the woman I had been, lost in a sea of other people's needs. As I packed my suitcase later that day, the sound of the zipper closing felt like a punctuation mark. It was final. This was it. I was leaving. I was reclaiming my life. The suitcase was heavy, but it wasn't the weight of the clothes inside it that weighed me down. It was the weight of all the years I had spent living for others, letting their demands drown out my own voice. But no more. This was my life, and I was finally going to live it for myself. I stood in the doorway of Rachel's house, the weight of my suitcase in my hand, and I paused for a moment. I looked around one last time at the house that had been my prison for so long, and I felt nothing. No more guilt, no more fear. I walked out of the door into the cool air outside, feeling the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. I was free. Free from Rachel, free from Nancy, free from the family that had never truly seen me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the thrill of possibility. My new life was beginning, and I was finally, truly living in it for myself. The silence of the house was deafening as I sat alone at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me, staring at the wood. The clock on the wall ticked, each second stretching out like an eternity. The faint sound of its rhythm echoed in the room, a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts racing through my mind. I had refused to give Rachel my pension card, and the world seemed to be holding its breath in the aftermath of that decision. The air felt thick, heavier now than it had been before. I could practically feel the tension in the walls, as if the house itself was waiting for something to happen. I was waiting too, waiting for something, anything, to tell me I had done the right thing, but nothing came. Instead, there was only the gnawing feeling deep inside me, guilt. I had spent my whole life giving, and now I was walking away. Was I abandoning them? The question echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain. Rachel, Ben, this house, this life I had spent decades building, was I leaving it all behind for nothing? But then another feeling began to rise, slowly, like a flame catching in dry grass. It wasn't guilt, but relief, a sense of freedom I had never allowed myself to feel before. I'd been living in a cage of my own making for so long, doing everything I could for Rachel, for Ben, for the family, never once thinking about what I needed. My body had been a vessel for everyone else's needs, but now I could finally focus on myself. The realization was like a wave sweeping over me, cleansing me of all the years of self-sacrifice and silence. I wasn't just escaping Rachel's grasp, though. This wasn't just about her, it was about me. I deserve this. For the first time in my life, I wasn't doing something because I had to, because I was expected to. I was making a choice for myself. And that realization came crashing down on me like a tidal wave, knocking all the pieces of my life into a new, stark clarity. I wasn't just Anna, the mother, the grandmother, the caretaker. I was Anna, the woman, the person with a right to her own life. The weight of the decision settled over me like a blanket, heavy and warm, but it wasn't suffocating anymore, it was freeing. My eyes drifted to the window where the faint light of the street lamp outside spilled into the kitchen, casting long shadows across the floor. The darkness seemed endless, but there was a peace in it now. I knew what I had to do as I stood from the table, the floor creaked beneath me, the sound cutting through the silence. My movements were swift now, decisive. I couldn't waste any more time wondering whether this was the right thing to do. I'd spent so many years putting off my own happiness, so many years trying to please others. Well, it was over. I couldn't keep living like this. I walked to the closet and began pulling out my things. Each item I packed felt like I was shedding years of emotional baggage. I grabbed clothes, toiletries, a few photos, and whatever else I could fit into the suitcase. The sound of the zipper closing echoed in the room, final and certain. For a moment, I paused. My hands rested on the suitcase, and I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. I thought of all the years I had spent trying to make Rachel happy, trying to meet her expectations. I had cooked her meals, cleaned her house, taken care of Ben while she lived her life, her carefree life. And what had I gotten in return? A thank you here and there, but mostly silence, mostly nothing. There was a sharp pain in my chest as the weight of those unappreciated years settled on me. But it wasn't the same pain as before. It wasn't a pain that could drown me. No, this was a pain that told me I had finally woken up. It was a pain that reminded me I had lived too long for others, and now I had the right to live for myself. I stood there for a long moment, letting that thought sink in. I wasn't the woman I had been when I walked into this house. No, I was different now. Yay! Stronger, resolved. I had finally found my voice, and it wasn't going to be silenced again.
But even in this serene new life, the ghosts of my past still lingered. There were moments, fleeting but sharp, when the guilt crept back in, especially when I thought about Rachel. I couldn't help but wonder if I had made the right choice in leaving her behind. What if I had made a mistake? What if she needed me, even if she had never shown it? What if Ben was growing up without me? The pangs of doubt would come in waves, threatening to pull me back into the life I had left behind. One afternoon, as I walked along a quiet trail near our home, the guilt hit me again. The sound of my footsteps on the dirt path was the only thing breaking the silence, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of the world had settled on my shoulders. I thought of Ben, his innocent face, his sweet smile. How could I have walked away from him? How could I have left him behind? But then, as I stood there, watching the sunlight dance on the river nearby, I realized something. I had spent so many years giving everything I had, with nothing in return. My entire life had been devoted to others, and I had forgotten to give anything to myself. The truth hit me with the force of a thunderclap. I can't continue to live this way. I had to learn to love myself, to fill my own cup before I could give to anyone else. Rachel and Ben would have to learn to live without me, just as I had learned to live without them. And that was okay. I was allowed to be okay. As the weeks passed, I began to find my own rhythm. I would take long walks in the mornings, enjoying the quiet beauty of the landscape. I would paint, cook, explore the town, and slowly, piece by piece, I was becoming someone I had almost forgotten. There were moments when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She was stronger, more confident, more alive. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. The moments of peace became more frequent, and with each passing day, I felt more connected to myself. I felt a new kind of joy, the joy of being me, without apology, without guilt, without the weight of everyone else's expectations on my shoulders. One morning, I decided to take a walk through a vast open field near our house. The sky was wide and blue, and the wind whispered softly through the tall grass. I stood there in the middle of it, the vastness of the world stretching out before me, and I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't weighed down by the past. I wasn't afraid of the future. I was simply here, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the wind on my face. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was exactly where I needed to be. For the first time in so long, I didn't feel like I was just existing. I was living. And for the first time in years, I felt truly free. As I stood there, the grass brushing against my legs, the sun warming my face, I smiled. This was my life now. And it was just beginning. It started with a message. At first, I didn't recognize the number. Too many days had passed since I had heard from Rachel. But the familiar weight of dread settled in my chest when I saw her name on the screen. It was a simple message, deceptively innocent, laden with just the right mix of sweetness and urgency. Mom, we need you. Ben misses you so much. Please, it's not the same without you. I don't know what to do. You're the only one who can help. I've been trying to manage everything, but it's hard. Please, come back. We need you. I read the words several times, each one sinking deeper into my chest. I could hear her voice in my head, soft, pleading, like I had heard so many times before. I need you. I had known it was only a matter of time. Rachel's manipulation had always been subtle, carefully crafted to tug at my heartstrings, to make me feel as though I was the only one who could save her from herself. This was no different. The message was designed to pull me back into the role I had played for years, the role of the emotional caretaker, the one who had to fix everything, no matter the cost to myself. But I was no longer that woman. I wasn't the woman who could be so easily swayed by guilt, who would crumble at the thought of Ben's sadness. For the first time, I saw the game for what it was, a game I had been playing for far too long, and one that I was finally ready to walk away from. Rachel's message wasn't about Ben. It was never about Ben. It was about Rachel's need to control, her desire to keep me tethered to her, to continue feeding off the energy and care I had so willingly given. But not anymore. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. A part of me wanted to respond with compassion, with the love I had always given. But something inside me held firm. I had worked so hard to leave that suffocating environment, and now, just when I was beginning to breathe again, she was trying to drag me back into the chaos. She had no right. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the emotions churn inside me. I knew this was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to process. The guilt was there, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. How could I turn my back on Ben? The boy who had once been the light of my life. How could I walk away and leave him behind? But then, I thought of all the years spent making sacrifices, all the years spent living on Rachel's terms, bending to her every whim. I thought of the times I had bent over backward for her, cleaning up the messes she made, putting my own needs last for the sake of her happiness. What had I gotten in return? What had I truly received for all my efforts? I had given up my own identity for her, for Ben. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, never asking for anything, always giving. But I could see now that Rachel didn't care about what I needed. She cared about what I could give her. I finally typed my response, each word more firm than the last. Rachel, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I have given everything to you and the family for years, and it's never been enough. I can't keep sacrificing myself for you. I won't. I pressed send. The moment the message left my phone, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was like stepping out of a dark room into the light, like shedding a skin that had grown too tight. There was no turning back now. Rachel didn't take the news well. The phone calls came next, dozens of them, each more desperate than the last. She tried to guilt me into coming back, reminding me of all the things she had done for me, all the sacrifices she had made. But I wasn't listening to that voice anymore. I had heard it for years, and it was a voice that no longer held any power over me. Then came the ultimate manipulation. She invoked Ben. She claimed that I was abandoning my grandson. That I was walking away from a child who needed me. How could you leave him? She asked, her voice trembling with false sorrow. He needs you, Anna. You're his only family. At that moment, something shifted inside me. I felt the years of manipulation, the years of guilt, the years of self-sacrifice come crashing down. I realized then that I had been the one holding the strings all along. Not Rachel. Not Ben. Me. And for the first time in my life, I was making a decision that wasn't dictated by anyone else's needs. It was my turn to decide what was best for me. Rachel's desperate pleas didn't move me. I wasn't going to be the puppet anymore, dangling from the strings of her emotional blackmail. I wasn't going to let her use Ben to manipulate me into coming back. And that was when I made the final decision. I wasn't just going to refuse to go back to Rachel's toxic world, I was going to expose the truth. With trembling hands, I took my phone again, opened the camera, and began to speak. My voice was steady, but each word felt like a weight lifting from my chest. I've spent years hiding in the shadows, trying to please everyone else, trying to be the mother, the grandmother, the caretaker. But it's time for the truth. Rachel has used me for years, emotionally manipulated me into thinking I was the only one who could save her, that I was the only one who could help. But I am not her servant. I am not her emotional crutch. And I am certainly not her tool. I have given everything to her and to this family, and I am done. I paused, taking a deep breath. The words that followed were harder to say. For years, Rachel has taken advantage of my love, using it as a tool to control me. She has manipulated my relationship with Ben, and she has made me feel like I was the one at fault for everything that went wrong. But no more. I am done being her victim. I hit post. And then I just stared at the screen, watching as the video uploaded. The silence in the room was deafening. The video went viral almost immediately. Messages of support flooded my inbox. People I didn't even know reached out, sharing their own stories of manipulation and control, telling me how my courage had inspired them to break free. And as the days passed, Rachel's carefully constructed image began to crack. The narrative she had built around herself, the one where she was always the victim, always the one who needed saving, unraveled. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no hiding from it now. The freedom I felt in those moments was indescribable. I had spoken my truth, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care about the consequences. I had exposed the lies, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my own power. Rachel's manipulation had no hold on me anymore. I was free. And nothing, not even her, could ever take that away from me again. In the days that followed the video, the world around me seemed to shift in ways I never expected. The weight that had once held me down, that burden of secrecy, of guilt, of living in the shadows, had been lifted. And in its place, something new began to grow, a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. When I first hit post on that video, I had no idea what would come of it. But what followed was nothing short of incredible. The community's response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people I barely knew, from strangers who had seen the video and felt compelled to reach out. They shared their stories with me, stories of emotional manipulation, of years spent living for others, of being trapped in toxic relationships. And they thanked me. They thanked me for speaking up, for breaking free, for giving them the courage to do the same. It was humbling. I hadn't expected to be a symbol of strength, but that's what I became. People who had once seen me as just another quiet, invisible figure in Rachel's world now saw me as someone who had taken control of her life. They saw me as a woman who had reclaimed her power. And that recognition, that respect, was more than I could have ever imagined. Santa Fe, our new home, became the sanctuary I had longed for. The small town, with its peaceful streets and quiet corners, was a balm to my wounded soul. Edward and I found solace in the simple life we were building together. The emotional burdens of the past were slowly but surely falling away, and in their place was a quiet contentment that we hadn't known in years. We laughed more. We talked more. We took the time to really enjoy each other's company, to appreciate the moments that came with being together, without the noise and chaos of our former life. We explored the town, walked along the riverbanks, and spent lazy afternoons in the garden. We did things we had never allowed ourselves to do before. The pressure was gone, the weight of obligation lifted. We were free. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was truly living. There was a lightness in my step, a freedom in my heart that I had never experienced. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer had the power to define me. I was no longer bound by the expectations of others. I had taken control, and now I was making my own choices. But even as I reveled in this newfound peace, there was still a decision I needed to make. A final step in this process of healing and reclaiming my life. I had severed the emotional ties with Rachel and Andrew, but there was one last thing to do. I needed to make the decision to fully leave them behind. It wasn't just about walking away from them physically, it was about cutting the emotional cords that had kept me tied to them for so long. I sat down one evening, my thoughts quiet for the first time in days, and I reflected on everything I had been through. The years of sacrifice, the manipulation, the guilt that had plagued me for far too long. I had done everything for Rachel. I had put myself last, again and again, because I thought that was what mothers did. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. But I had learned something vital in these last few months: I am allowed to choose myself. The emotional weight of this decision was heavier than I expected. It wasn't easy to sever the ties, to truly let go of a person you had once loved with all your heart. But I knew it was necessary. I could not continue to carry the weight of Rachel's manipulation. I could not continue to be the person she wanted me to be. In order to fully embrace my new life, I had to let go of the toxic relationships that had held me back for so long. And so, I did. I sent one final message, a message that marked the end of that chapter of my life. It was simple but powerful. Rachel, I've given you everything I had to give. But I can no longer be a part of your world. I am choosing myself now. I am choosing peace. I wish you well, but I can't keep being part of your manipulation. Goodbye. As soon as I pressed send, I felt a deep sense of relief. The decision was made. I was no longer a prisoner to Rachel's needs, to her guilt trips, to her emotional demands. I was free. And as I closed my phone and looked at Edward, I could see the pride in his eyes. He had always believed in me. He had always seen me for who I truly was, not just for the role I had played in Rachel's life. And now, we were moving forward together, free from the past, with nothing but the future ahead of us. The final moments of this new chapter came one afternoon as Edward and I took a walk down a quiet street in Santa Fe. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over everything. We walked hand in hand, our steps in sync, our hearts at peace. There was no rush. No need to hurry. We had all the time in the world. And in that moment, as I looked over at Edward, I realized something profound. The freedom I had fought for, the life I had rebuilt, was more than I could have ever dreamed of. It wasn't just about escaping Rachel. It was about reclaiming myself. I was no longer the person I had been, caught in a web of guilt and sacrifice. I was Anna. A woman who had finally learned to live for herself. The future was bright, full of possibility. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally, truly, living my life on my own terms. We smiled at each other, our love stronger than ever. And as we walked down that quiet street, hand in hand, I knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning.